Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our session on how to build conversational AI experiences powered by large language models with Vertex AI Conversation and Dialogflow CX. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community. And I'm thrilled to be here today with Alessia, developer advocate of Cloud AI solutions at Google Cloud, and Xavier, head of infrastructure at VoiceFlow, and a Google developer expert and a Google Cloud champion innovator. We also have Chris, a developer advocate of Cloud AI solutions, who will be joining us in the chat and helping to answer your questions there. So we're thrilled to have an amazing lineup of content and material to share with you today. But before we do that, just a few final reminders that questions are encouraged. So please feel free to add those into the YouTube chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them either in the chat or at the end of the presentation. And for any questions that we don't get to, we encourage you to search and make a post in the Google Cloud community where you can engage with each other, your peers, Googlers, and help solve each other's questions together. And the link to that is in the YouTube description, along with a few other resources that we'll be covering live during the session today. All right, with that, please don't be shy. We'd love to hear from you in the chat where you're joining us from. And again, if you have any questions. And with that, Alessia, I'll hand it over to you to take us through the content today.
Thank you so much, Lauren. You're awesome as usual. Hello, everyone. And I do want to thank those who were able to join, who are watching this live. But I also want to say hi to those who will be watching this video. Today we'll be talking about conversational AI, large language models, how a little bit non-deterministic they are, and because we deal with unpredictable humans in conversational AI, we do want to make sure that you guys get the importance of following conversation design principles and find a balance, aim for a balance between traditional conversation design and generative AI. My name is Alessia. I am a developer advocate of Cloud AI solutions at Google Cloud. And today with me, we've got
Xavi. Thanks, Alessia and Lauren for introducing me. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's the second session that I joined to talk about conversational AI with all the conversational AI tools that are in Google. So yeah, as Lauren said, I'm a Google Dev Library author, champion innovator, and developer expert in machine learning with expertise in conversational AI. You can follow me in all my social media, especially GitHub and Twitter at Xavidop. And yeah, I'm working at head of infrastructure at VoiceFlow. So the agenda for today, we are going to cover several topics. We are going to have a live demo as well. But basically, what we are going to start with is basically to talk about what we have talked in the previous episode. Remember that in July, we had another live. In that case, was Chris and me. Then we are going to talk about generative AI applied to conversational AI. Then common user needs and capabilities, like all the problems that we have and all the solutions that we can now have on Google Cloud Platform to solve those problems. Then best practices, and then resources, and we will have a Q&A. So please drop all your questions in the chat, as Lauren said. So first, from the previous episode, just a super quick recap. In the previous episode, what we have seen is basically we introduce the NLU, the natural language understanding, which is basically how in the conversational AI world, how we can extract information from all the user requests, like users, for instance, in this case, how do I cook paella? How can we extract that information in order to understand our users and in order to proceed and to flow in our conversations? That was the natural language understanding. And the other thing that we introduced was Dialogflow CX itself, which is, if you don't know, Dialogflow CX is the conversational AI platform in Google Cloud Platform that is based in basically flows and pages. So you can design conversations by transition from one page, one node into another. Basically, the Dialogflow CX is a state machine that manages all your conversations. So that is the quick recap that we did in the from the previous episode, and now we are gonna start talking about generative AI applied to conversational AI. The most important thing here is that generative AI in conversations, what we are gonna have, and now that Dialogflow CX is now super chat with generative AI, you can check all that information in the docs and play with that in the Dialogflow CX, because now it's generally available. But what we are gonna have basically is we're gonna create natural conversations, which is super important. Once we are creating agents, assistants, chatbots, IVR systems, the most important thing is to create natural conversations. Those conversations are going to be more informational with thanks to the generative AI, and with all the solutions that we have right now available. We are going to bring more information to those conversations in more natural way. Of course, responsibly control. Okay, when we talk about generative AI, there are some concerns that we will discuss about this a little bit later. But yeah, everything responsibly controlled. But at the end, overall, the main goal of this is to create unique experiences and to create conversations that have a better context control. Once we are talking to people, there are things that are implicit, but once you are talking about assistants, there are things that are not implicit, and generative AI will help us on that front. It is worth mentioning here the Google Cloud AI's portfolio before we jump into Dialogflow CX and all the new capabilities. From bottom to top, what we can see is basically the Google Cloud infrastructure, GPUs, TPUs, all the top tech that Google bring us on Vertex AI. Then on top of that, what we have is basically the Vertex AI model garden, where you can find all the Google models, third parties, and you can build your own models. On top of that, we have Vertex AI Generative Studio, where you can choose and play with large language models, try prompts, you can fine-tune Palm, for example. And then we have Vertex AI's Search and Conversations, which is the new product that you can find on Vertex AI, and we will talk about it a little bit more. But basically, you will be able to create knowledge bases with just a few clicks. And then on top of that, we have our AI platforms, which is, for instance, in this case, Dialogflow CX. So as a solution overview, in the past, what we have is Dialogflow CX right in the middle, the conversation design layer, and integrations, telephony, messaging, like all these built-in integrations, one-click deployment. But right now, there are more things, more people playing in this game. So in this case, we have Vertex AI Conversation and large language models. On the Vertex AI Conversations, the chat apps data stores is where we are gonna create all our data stores. As I said, data stores could be called knowledge bases as well. So basically, we are gonna populate there all our documents, all our structured and unstructured data located in our Google Cloud storage, in webs, everything. And Dialogflow CX will access that information. And of course, that at the bottom we have large language models. We will use large language models in the generative layers to create basically responses, basically.
So Xavi, To recap a little bit and to make sure that, with all these new generative AI things and these new entries, everyone we're all on the same page. So Dialogflow CX remains the tool to design amazing conversational experiences that potentially call backend services or integrated with voice or other channels. We introduced Vertex AI Search and Conversation, which is like a sort of a manager of the data stores, as you said, the knowledge bases and the chat apps. And of course, now with large language models, we are giving our amazing users the possibilities to create generative responses that is going to supplement, is going to complement the experience of the agents as such. Is that correct?
Exactly. Dialogflow CX still remains the same in terms of our dialogue manager, but right now we have superpowers and new friends like Vertex AI Search and Conversations and large language models, basically.
And we like friends, so the more the merrier.
Yes, it adds a lot of value. So with that being said, what are the common user needs, like problems that we have heard, like and then the capabilities basically. Um, if we start talking about the problems that users are trying to solve when they are using conversational AI, it's basically that for example they have or like a company wants to create a chatbot or an assistant, and the company has a lot of useful information, but at the end the chatbots, or they are getting a lot of live agents requests, basically a lot of manual interactions. They are not their assistants, they are not resolving those requests, and the information is already available, but the requests are not being solved. Then another problem that we have here is basically, as you know, the conversations can flow and you don't know where you can go, basically. So at certain point you will see the classic "sorry, I don't understand you." In this case, what we can provide is a large language model response. In this case, it is called generative fallback on Dialogflow CX. And the first thing that I mentioned is called data stores, the knowledge base that I said. And then, Alessia, what is the other problem that we have here and the solution?
Well, something that we keep hearing from folks, especially from those who have played with the Palm APIs, is okay, so LLMs are great at doing a number of things like content summarization, question answering, and even writing code and updating an object in a database or things like that. So it would be great if we could leverage LLMs without actually reinventing the wheel and creating a webhook and make and implement an integration with those APIs. Can I somehow at any point in the dialogue, can you give me the opportunity to call an LLM to make whatever a large language model can do? And so if we now switch from a problem perspective to a sort of like solution perspective, what I'd like to do from now for a little bit is going through each of those three needs, each of those three user stories, and see how data store agent, generative fallback, and lastly, generators can help you developers and can actually improve the experience with an agent. So the first one is data store agent. How do we help this university? Well, basically, let's say that we have several implementations of retrieval augmented generation inside Google Cloud. And Data Store Agent, which is formerly known as a Generative AI Agent and formerly known as Infobot, is where RAG comes into play. What is RAG? Well, simply put, RAG allows LLMs to give better answers by allowing a large language model to tap to additional data resources without retraining. The data that is normally used to train a large language model can be years out of date, and that's due to the fact that large language models, take ages, take a long time. They're time-consuming, the training processing, time-consuming, long, and lastly, and for a corporate chatbot, it might actually not include the information specific to the organization's products and services. So what we want to give our customers and our users is the possibility to get grounded responses. So responses that are consistent and accurate and specific to the knowledge base, to the know-how, to the content. But at the same time, we want to reach the response that we give back to the user using large language models. So the Data Store Agent works pretty much this way. So you provide a website link or a group of documents in a Google Cloud Storage bucket or a data in BigQuery. And Vertex Search and Conversation will actually create a Dialogflow CX agent for you that is configured, that is powered by a large language model, that is configured to be able to answer questions from users about your content. We are going to see this in detail later on with Xavier, but it's important to say that as a first thing, when the user asks a question, Dialogflow, the first thing that Dialogflow is going to do is determine the user intent and extract any relevant information, or potentially do what we call in LLM slot filling. Let's imagine that actually Dialogflow doesn't find any matches. Why? Because the question coming from the user is actually a question that can be answered directly querying the knowledge base, the data store. And that's step number 3. So it searches for relevant documents in the data store, in our knowledge base. And once the most probable answers are returned, assuming that we pass all the safeguards like potential grounded, and so if actually those answers are promoted, they're going to be fed into LLM that is going to give not just that specific answer, which is what an FAQ, which is what we used to in a static word, but it's actually going to take into account the conversation, it's going to take into account the context up until that point. So how do we configure this? Well, on the left-hand side, we've got Vertex AI Search and Conversation, because now we've got these two, right? These two places. In Search and Conversation, we create a data store. That again, it could be HTML pages or PDF documents collected from Google Search Engine or in a Google Cloud Storage bucket or coming from BigQuery. On a Dialogflow CX side, on the right-hand side, the agent is configured if you actually start with a brand new chat app to use that data store, and it will leverage what we call data store handler, which is just a type of handler, an event handler. And then of course the result of the answer, and then on the bottom right we actually see the kind of experience that we have, and see that little star that actually is the proof that we're getting a generic response. So it's not just the answer from a CSV file. Okay, this is my favorite one. Okay, so this is how we try to, to help you guys and developers to handle those corner cases that we do have in a normal dialogue. I believe that we are unpredictable, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this session. And it's just part of, it's just the result of the fact that natural language, which is a big umbrella word that comprises all our languages, including speech and sign is full of nuances and context bound. So there are many possibilities along a dialogue where the user might remain silent or say something unexpected. And as Xavier said before, definitely we don't want to respond yes, okay, that's fine. But there must be a better way to help the user to provide a cooperative response rather than saying, oh, sorry, I didn't get what you said, because again, that's not cooperative. I'm going to give you a quick example. So I was in San Francisco about a couple of months ago, and I read the menu and I couldn't figure out if they could give me some fruit. And I asked the waiter, do you have any fruit? And she said, no. And then I looked at the menu once again, and I actually did notice that there was a dessert that also included fruit. So a beautiful cooperative response would have been there, no, but I can give you this. Okay, so that's just a way for me to say that generative fallback comes into play when we want to steer the conversation back on track and reset the expectations about what is and what isn't possible. How does it work? The execution flow. User says something unexpected. It does trigger what you guys are probably familiar with. It's a no match, okay? A no match at page level, flow level, or maybe a parameter doesn't satisfy, doesn't match with the entity type. At that point in time, when a no match is triggered, that's when generative fallback comes into play. The prompt, let me move on to this slide. The prompt, this is an example, okay, of generative fallback. The prompt that we write on the left-hand side, which, as you can see, uses natural language, is actually a prompt that is going to be sent by Dialogflow to LLM, which also comprises things like the conversation, the last user utterance, the intent description, and the flow description, which hopefully is going to, when the no match is raised, and that's why we enable generative response on the event handler itself, on the no match event handler itself, it's going to say something like, in this case, no, we don't offer courses, but can help you book a group reservation. Okay, now the third one we want to talk about is generators. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, Generator allows users to make a call to an LLM natively from Dialogflow CX to do anything that you would not ask an LLM to do, and that this could be a content summarization, could be conversation summarization, or it could be question answering. And now you're probably guys asking me, hang on, Alessia, so if you're saying that a generator can do question answering, when do I use data store agent and when do I use a generator? And that would be a brilliant question. So to answer this question, let me give you an example that is kind of going to anticipate what we'll see later on in the demo. Blood eligibility. Okay, so there are, depending on whereabouts in the word, let's say that I am a donor. Depending on whereabout I'm in the word, Red Cross enforces different requirements and different regulations for donors to be able to donate blood. Now, let's say that I have a question. I've just returned from a trip to Africa. And I, as a donor, I don't know, I've got an appointment to donate blood, but I'm not sure if as a donor, because I've returned from a trip to Africa, I'm still eligible to donate. The answer might be different depending on whereabout I am. For instance, in Australia wants me to wait 4 months before I can actually donate blood for, due to potential diseases, malaria, and this kind of stuff, as opposed to the US. So again, we do want our responses to be accurate. We don't want to say 2 months, which is potentially what an LLM, which is not grounded, which is not bundled, which is not tied to a real data store, to your content. We don't want that generic answer because that might be imprecise, that might be not correct. And that's actually where data store agent comes into play. We could potentially do question answering with self-provided knowledge or dynamic knowledge, but I do recommend that actually going down that path, we use data store agents and we delegate generators with all the other tasks. Okay, A very similar flow. We are at the fulfillment of a route. We've completed form filling or event handler or a parameter level. The generator is going to be triggered as part of the fulfillment. The text prompt is going to be sent to LLM. But the text prompt this time has got some interesting things as opposed to the generative fallback prompt. Why? With generative fallback, we mentioned that we can actually inject into the text prompt the flow description, the intent description, the conversation, and the last user utterance. Well, generators give you guys the possibilities to inject the session parameters values that you've been collecting throughout the dialogue. And if you see in the little prompt, I have defined here age and weight, which are two factors that I need to take into account when I determine the eligibility of the person to donate blood. Now, age and weight at the same time need to be somehow associated to the real session parameters values. At runtime, dynamically, when the text prompt is sent to LLM, also the value of age and weight provided by the user are sent along. Okay, and the response, the experience that we get is actually what we see on the right-hand side. But that's just a spoiler of the demo, because this is actually what we're going to see live in a bit. So I just want to call out again what we are going to see in the demo. We are going to see data stores. They are great. A data store agent, a data store are great at doing question answering about what? About blood eligibility questions. And then we're seeing generative fallback and how they manage error handling, how they increases intent coverage, and how actually they are able to handle unexpected user inputs. And then last but not least, a generator as a decision maker used to determine the eligibility of the user to donate blood. Now, maybe the demo got with me. I'm going to switch to the if I'm able to do that. Okay, here we go. Lauren said to me, I can do that for you. That would have been great. Okay. So I hope that you guys can see the Dialogflow CX console. Okay. I want to go straight into the first conversational. Let me close this. Okay, into the conversation. Okay, so remember the question that I mentioned before. I've just come back from a trip to Africa. Am I eligible to donate blood? You do see here how the response that we get is generative. In fact, we do see these two little stars, and it's precisely okay. It's a response which is grounded to the data store. In fact, it's telling me that I have to wait. This is taken. Okay, so heads up. The data store that I'm using here is actually a GCS bucket where I've uploaded a bunch of HTML pages that I've crawled down from the Australian Red Cross website. And that's why actually it's mentioned 4 months as a proof of that. Let me go into the JSON response. So farther down, so you see that we are calling search with that original query. I'm eligible to donate blood after trip to Africa, with scanning a bunch of documents that potentially might have to respond to my question, like donating after traveling. That makes total sense to me. And then the responses, a few responses are compared. And if they pass a few checks, like the responsible AI check, it responds like the most probable one is then going to, and this is we pass the grounding. We're going to be talking about grounding later on as part of the pre-submitted questions. So let's say that, grounding is okay. And the response that we get is, yes, you're eligible to donate blood. I've trip to Africa and blah, 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 which is indeed coming from the data store. Okay, so what if now I ask a question which is directly related to the eligibility quiz? So let's see what happens now. Okay, See, on the left-hand side, a simulator is telling me that I've actually triggered the take eligibility quiz. So this is an intent I have defined. Okay, so we are in traditional Dialogflow CX land. I have, so Dialogflow CX from these user utterance, are there any other requirements to donate, has detected with a good confidence score that the intent is eligibility quiz, which is the intent in scope for that page. Again, we're going to be talking about the order input of evaluation, but see what's going on here. So rather than looking for the answer to this question in the data store, I've actually triggered an intent, which now is going to roll out the dialogue. So this is the way that you're familiar with. In particular, what's going to happen now is I'm going to be asked, the agent is going to be asking me several questions related to age, weight, potential physical conditions, travel, and all this kind of thing. Okay, so this is the form filling that we used to. Now, let's imagine that my phone is ringing. Hey, this is absolutely possible, okay? So rather than providing the age, I might just say, hang on, my phone's ringing for a second. Okay, so without generative fallback, the answer I would have got here would have been, sorry, I didn't get what you said. Well, instead, what we get is this request generative response, which is absolutely brilliant, which totally makes sense for what I said. Sure, take your time. So I'm not going to take my time now because obviously we are in a demo. And I'm going to go back into the flow, and I'm going to provide the agent. So we're still right on the page at the place where the agent is expecting to collect the age. And instead, I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm back and I'm 45. Next question, are you pregnant or recently given birth? So we're going through the questionnaire, the quiz, the eligibility quiz. The next question is about heart conditions and level of iron. By the way, see how on the left-hand side, we are storing in the session. Okay, that's the beauty of a state machine. So we are putting aside all this amazing information that the user has provided. Why? Because this information will be used later on to determine the eligibility of the user. Okay, well, this is actually real. I am vegetarian, so I need to say that loud. I'm vegetarian, so I have a light iron deficiency. What's your weight? Well, let's pretend that I'm 58 kilos, and then fingers crossed. Now, hopefully it's gonna work. Oh, I'm kidding. And yes, it did work. Okay, right. So let's see actually why I'm super happy, because this is actually spot on. Okay, so this is a sort of like a response that you would expect from a person, right? You're calling the agent, you provided a bunch of information, he has determined something. Based on the information you provided, you're eligible to donate blood. You're within the age range of 1875. Your weight is about 50 kilos, and you're not pregnant or have recently given birth. However, you mentioned that you have a light iron deficiency. Well, this does not disqualify you from donating blood. It is important to note that your iron levels will need to be within a certain range in order to donate. We recommend that you speak with your doctor or a healthcare professional to determine if your iron levels, blah, blah, blah. And then, hey, check this out. This is cool. In addition, you mentioned that you'd just come back from a trip to Africa. If you've been to high malaria risk, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what's the magic behind this? This is the magic behind this. This is precisely it. So there is a generator. Let me, for a second. Okay, let's close this. Okay, all right. So there is a generator that's been triggered. As a developer, I have created this text prompt. This text prompt, because we sort of like doing decision making here, I provided some facts. Remember before when I said you can inject, if there is little information, you can directly inject it in the text prompt. So I'm calling out that the minimum age is 18, the maximum is 75, and all the criteria. and then I'm sending along the age and weight, but also the conversation and the last user utterance as built-in placeholder and custom placeholder. I did mention in the conversation earlier on in the dialogue that I've come back from a trip to Africa. So I do expect that now I'm sort of disqualified, because not just because of my iron deficiency, but also because of the fact that I come back from a trip to Africa. But the demo isn't finished. And again, there is one more thing that I want to show you folks, which is what happens if now I sort of like, follow up and escalate. So the agent is telling me to consult a doctor. So the most reasonable thing to, you would expect is that the user inquires about potential doctor appointments. Okay, this is yet another generative response. I'm sorry, but Save a Life doesn't offer doctor's consultations. I can provide you with some resources that may help, or you can contact your own GP or healthcare provider. What's going on? Once again, we'd go and have a look at the original response. And further down, you're actually going to see that, here we go, that a sys no match default event has been triggered. And as a result of that, we're now sending this prompt, which is the generative fallback prompt that I have configured, together with the conversation up until that point, and together with also the flow and intent description and other meaningful information. Where do I set all this up? Well, there is a place in Dialogflow CX where you do that. That's the generative AI setup. This is all the generative bit, but what I want to show you right now is actually the generative fallback prompt. Save a Life doesn't offer doctor consultations. Refer to the. This is precisely the bit of information that the LLM used to return that response. I think I've covered all. So I'm gonna hand it over to Xavier.
All right. Yeah, that was a great demo, Alessia. Thanks for showcasing everything and all the three new features that we're seeing here: data stores, question answering, generative fallback for error handling, and generators for decision making. That was really, really great. But now that we have seen, and we talk about all these three new capabilities on Dialogflow CX, let's start talking about the best practices when using generative AI with conversational AI. The first thing, and I think is one of the most important ones, this is something that you have seen during the demo, but it is important to understand the order of evaluation, right, Alessia?
Absolutely, that it's super important. So in a way, it's actually, guys, what we've seen in the demo. So as a first thing, Dialogflow would always try to do the parameter extraction to fill in the slots, using the entities and detect the intent. But if there is no intent in scope, let's say like before, back to the example, the paella example, remember, so let's actually say that my bot isn't designed to be able to answer that question, but somehow it's connected to a data store of recipes. So now the data store is the subject matter expert to respond to the question, how do I make paella? And that's step number 3. So now that there is a state handler, we need to update this because it's actually saying generative AI agent, but now we're renaming once again. It's data store agent retrieval. So it's going to look up the answer, as we said, as for the blood donation thing. And jokes apart, but if that doesn't happen, as for the as we did see in the demo, and instead a no match has, because why? Because we actually haven't found an intent, a defined intent. We haven't found an answer in the data store. So now we raise a no match, and the no match is actually going to trigger generative fallback. That's super important.
Yeah, that's the like you have to have like this super clear once you are developing your agents and your assistants to understand all the responses and all the solutions that you are getting, basically. So yeah, and also another important thing from this slide is we have presented generators, we have presented data stores, Vertex AI, search and conversation, all that integrated with within Dialogflow CX, and generative fallback. One of our recommendations that we usually do in terms of conversational design is to not to enable all these things at the same time. The recommendation that we will uh, give to you is gonna be start with one, make sure that you have introduced that properly in your assistant, and then go to the next one. You know, for instance, starting with generators, creating like really good prompts, and you know, like now once you have that properly um, set, and you have like really good responses, then move on to the genetic fallback, and then do the same to the data stores, for example. That is one of our recommendations that we will see, and that's a best practice. Now talking that now that we are talking about best practices, another thing that we have to know is that testing conversational in the Gen AI world is gonna become a little bit more complex. Why? Because the generative AI outputs are non-deterministics. I mean, you can like set prompts, and you know, like add band phrases, and add a bunch of, you know, like words to have like most of your generative AI outputs being deterministic, but at the end the large language model is something that is going to be non-deterministic. So you are going to have a scope, but you will not know the answer. Okay, you will know the content, but you will know the answer itself. So for that, as a best practice, what we would suggest is basically these testing strategies to test your conversational AI apps once you are using generative AI. The first thing is the could be the most basic one, which is set the temperature to 0 in all generators. That means that you will have always the same answers. That, I mean, could be tedious because you have to go, you know, to all the generators and then to set the temperature to 0. So um, instead of doing that, another recommendation could be use string comparison algorithms. There are several string comparison algorithms that are like that does not require any model or anything to be trained, are just like pure mathematical models that can be executed. For instance, like equals, contains, test your output towards a regular expression, and then you can use string similarity algorithms, okay, like Hamming, Levenstein, Jaro Winkler. So when you use these similarity algorithms, you can set a threshold, and depending on the threshold, you can say if the test was good or was bad. Another testing strategy that you can do is like something that we can call it like bot-to-bot testing. Basically, use prompts to generate test instead of having like these classical or classic, you know, like test like hi, and then the agent responds you with how are you, and instead of that, and instead of on your agent saying like sorry, you on your test just adding hi, what you can add is a prompt saying you are gonna give a warm welcome to the agent. So the prompt, the LLM, it will generate um, a welcome message. So with that, you can, you know, like use prompts to generate tests. Highly recommended. And yeah, with those testing strategies, what I want to introduce here is a conversational profiler. Conversational profiler is a solution that is under the CX CLI. CX CLI is a CLI developed, it's an open source CLI developed by me. You can check the docs that we are gonna show you later, but basically it has all the things that I just talked about testing strategies in that CLI. You can create suites, you can create tests, and you can test your conversations using, for instance, contains, regex, string algorithms. You can use prompts as a user input instead of just saying hi. You can use a prompt, and you can execute the suite just running CXLI profile conversation execute, and then the YAML. The tests are declaratives, so yeah, feel free to check the CXCLI out, because it's an open source project, and it will bring more superpowers to Dialogflow CX. And what happened with, like the existing or the hybrid agents? This is something that probably most of you are asking, like, how can I introduce the generative AI features, or how can I choose generative AI for my assistants? What happened with the classic Dialogflow CX with the intent-based conversation? So in this case, what we would suggest basically is the generative AI features. You should use these features basically when you want to bring a bunch of information, with using data stores in your agents, like bring websites, a bunch of documents, all those stuff. That is highly recommended to use the generative AI features. Uh, for providing or creating frequently asked question bots. That is with data stores, you can create that super easy. With the power of the LLMs and the generators and all that stuff, you can use, like this for retrieval, for decision making, as we saw in the Alessia's bot, code generation. All these kind of things can be used, and if you want to use it, instead of calling a webhook that makes a summary, or a webhook that makes a data transformation, you can try this generator, these LLMs, and yeah, just give it a try. So and for the intent-based conversation, is basically when you want to build like complex conversations that requires basically flows, that requires an state machine, when you want to transition from one place to another, when you want to control basically your conversation. That is when the intent-based conversations make sense. And of course, you can mix all together, as Alessia showcased. You can create complex conversations with transition from flows to one place to another, and then add those generative AI features if those make sense to add in your assistant. And yeah, I think with that being said, the next thing is resources and what's next, and we have Lauren here again.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for this presentation, information, and the demos that you shared. And thank you all for sticking with us and for all of your questions and comments in the chat. Before we get to them, we did just have a few additional resources to cover before we jump into the Q&A. So first, you'll see on the left is the Dialogflow CX CLI details and resources from Xavier. And then on the right, we have a link to the community. So this is if you're running into any additional questions, you can ask them in the forums, and you can stay up to date on events just like this one. And so lastly is that feedback form. It'll take just 30 seconds to a minute to complete. We'd love to hear your feedback on this session, and if you have any suggestions for future topics that we should cover. And for quick reference, all of these links are in the YouTube description, so you can access them there. And before we jump into the Q&A, the last is we already shared a link in the chat to one of these code labs, but Alessia and Chris, who's been in the chat with you all, have put together these fantastic resources and code labs that you can get started and get hands-on with some of the different ideas and strategies that we talked about today. So Alessia, do you have anything else you want to share about these resources?
No, all good. I do see that you already shared this links. But again, if you've got any questions about this code labs, feel free to drop it in the forums, and we'll get back to you specifically on your questions.
Amazing. Awesome. Okay, so we did receive several questions in advance from the registration form, which we believe will be helpful for you as well. So we'll cover these and then start mixing in some of your live questions from the chat, those that we haven't addressed. So first, we noticed some questions coming in around alternative solutions. So how does this compare to LangChain? Can it be used with LangChain or does it replace it? And then can I just use LangChain to build these generative conversational experiences myself? Any thoughts from the team here?
Yeah, so those are like great questions. What I would say is Dialogflow CX is a platform with that has, you know, like a lot of things built in basically and fully integrated. And LangChain, at least for me, is a framework. Of course, with both you can create conversational AI apps, but they are using different approaches. In Dialogflow CX, basically, you have like this visual, you know, way of creating apps where you can create flows, you can create page, you have that state machine, and you go from one place to another, basically. And with LangChain is more like for, you know, like to chaining basically and to interact with just pure large language models for complex conversations that requires flows. What I would suggest is to use that Dialogflow CX basically.
Makes good sense. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more about LangChain, or if you have additional questions, we do have an event coming up in November that will be discussing it in specifically. So just drop that into the chat if you're curious to dive a little bit deeper into LangChain. But going off of the topic of which solutions to pick, we also had a question in the chat talking about Generative AI Studio versus Dialogflow CX. So do you have any recommendations around which tool to use for which use case and any high-level information around the difference between those platforms?
I kind of think we have somehow answered this question, as in as Xavier said. Obviously, there are different ways to address different use cases. And I would say that if you are going to use Generative AI Studio, then you will leverage the PaLM APIs. Now, the PaLM APIs offer two different services. One is the text, and the other one is the chat. The other one, the chat one, supports multi-conversational terms. Having said that, I do believe that depending on the nature of your agent, if your agent is more an agent that is expected to receive even complex questions like employees questions that to be able to answer need to look into lots of documents and potentially use embeddings. And so if you go down that path and embeddings and vectors, then I would recommend probably building something in Generative AI Studio that is able to use natural language, but without implementing a really complex dialogue that goes through lots of back and forth to be able to fulfill something. Let's just remember that behind those all generative AI features, Dialogflow CX is great at calling external systems. And there is a question later on about all the integrations. Still, all these integrations are supported. Integrations with conversational platforms, integrations with voice, integrations with backend systems, CRM apps. And so it's not just generative as such. And so I think the response is it really depends on the use case and on what you're trying to achieve. If you need a state machine, then I would recommend Dialogflow CX.
Yeah, 100% agree. And regarding the generative AI studio and versus Dialogflow CX, what I would suggest is for generative AI studio as well is something that you can go there and play with prompts and all that stuff, and then use those prompts in your Dialogflow CX as well as a testing platform, basically.
Totally. And I think it also depends on like the level, obviously, depending on where you are in the stack. If you are lower in the stack, you have more flexibility. You can choose your model back to what we said before, embeddings. At the moment, we support text Bison for all these features. Generators actually allow you to select something different other than that. But like for data store agent, you can't configure the prompt. So +1 on what Xavier said. It really depends on what level of abstraction and what really matters for you. And thumbs up with what Chris just said. It really depends if you need an LLU engine or because Dialogflow CX is what we know. Like it's been there for now 7 years and it does its things really well.
Great. Thank you all for your responses there. So moving right along around the topic of the future of traditional chatbots, will Dialogflow entities and intents be replaced by Gen AI functionality in the future, since LLMs can handle NLP tasks better?
And I think this is a great. I like the live question is a great segue to do this to this one. Well, I would say never. But as far as I'm concerned, and this is Alessia speaking, right? This is my humble opinion, and I think when we talk about these things, we become a little bit philosophical. And I'm very opinionated about conversation and how you design chatbots and voice bots that are able to resist human contact for more than a minute. That's actually what I would say. It's a good chatbot. I do believe that we should never delegate tasks like slot filling, parameter extraction, text detection to these generative AI features at the moment, precisely the ones that we have talked about. And I'll tell you why, for instance, about slot filling. So in a generative conversation, and by generative conversation, I mean a conversation where all the responses are generated. While it looks like LLM is actually asking you valid prompts, what's your age and what's your weight? Be careful that actually the user input is actually not really passed as an entity, as the NLU engine behind Dialogflow CX would do. So actually those little pieces of information would not be extracted and would not be persisted in session. So you actually wouldn't be doing parameters filling, font filling, which is necessary. We are working on generative playbooks that will allow you to create a Dialogflow CX agent in a different way from the way you do that. At the moment, you define flows and intents and transitions. Well, in that case, you'll create natural language. You write natural language instructions that will generate a bot for you. But again, I do believe that all these are great features, but should be handled really carefully, because while it looks like we do have control, at the same time, as we said, due to the nature, we are dealing with generalist word probability machines and also a little bit undeterministic. So again, it really depends. But long story short, I don't think that we can replace.
I agree with you, Alessia. Of course, the generative playbooks is like a different way of creating conversational AI. assistants or agents, but at the end there should be some control under the hood. And for your information as well, the generative AI playbooks are under preview, so you can request access to your Google Cloud platform customer success to give you access.
Indeed.
Great. And speaking of access, we did just have one question around availability. So is the solutions that we've talked about publicly available?
Yeah. 100%. Yep.
Yes.
Since August, late August. Yes, this is all public available. Yeah.
It's always fun when we can say that.
So true.
All right. Now we have one specifically for you, Xavier. While we have you here, how does your company VoiceFlow complement Dialogflow CX?
Yeah, so VoiceFlow basically is also a conversational AI platform with a focus on prototype and conversational design. So basically, what I would suggest is to go to VoiceFlow, design your conversations. In VoiceFlow, you will find these generative AI capabilities as well, but built by VoiceFlow. And then once you can once you can design those conversational AI apps, you can share those with your customers, do kind of testing, accept tests, doing these kind of things, and then go to Dialogflow CX to implement the final solution to run your chatbots basically.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Moving along, and we do realize we're a little over time, so we're going to keep moving on with some questions. So if you are able to stick with us, that's great. If not, you can check it out at the recording once we close today. But we have gotten a few questions around internationalization. So do you support other languages like Spanish and Portuguese? And is there any resources that I can locate or that you can provide that provides additional context around internationalization with Dialogflow CX and the generative AI features?
Yeah, so Vertex AI Conversations, like the part of the data store agents, support the majority of European languages like Italian, Spanish, French, Danish, Dutch, and also Hindi. Generators are currently available for agents in any Dialogflow language, and generative fallback is currently available in the languages supported by Vertex AI Palm API. So go to the Dialogflow in the Dialogflow CX documentation, you will find links that will guide you to know if your language is supported or not for these GenAI capabilities, basically.
Makes sense. All right, moving along. And I think there are some additional questions around this in the chat, so we'll hop right into those. But do you have any context that you can share around connecting to different data sources, CRMs, or voice integrations? Does Dialogflow CX work with Vertex AI Search, text-to-speech APIs, and other Google Cloud services?
So yeah, definitely. As I mentioned earlier on, at this point in time, we do provide several open source. I did see a question about WhatsApp Business. So we do support the majority of these platforms, the most popular ones, like Slack and Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and others, so messaging platforms. And of course, voice-wise, we have worked with all our amazing partners via Genesis and Twilio to create voice integration. So they're all telephony partners. So this is literally like they work with us, they partnership with us to write the integration, to write the APIs to support those integrations. Having said that, if there's something that we haven't covered, of course you can use the Dialogflow APIs. From a webhook perspective, from the point of view of integrating your agent with backend services, well, the word is an oyster. And we do offer flexible webhooks as well as standard webhooks to connect your agent. So but basically what normally happens is the user input and the analytic engine extracts the user input, resolves the entity, and then once you've got all your data, it's validated, and then it's used to perform some tasks. So for some sort of fulfillment, like, I don't know, write in a database or get the latest information from a CRM system. And then as far as it concerns with data stores at the moment, we do support we give you the ability to provide a website link, and the HTML pages and PDF documents will be collected from Google search engine. Otherwise, you can upload all the files I've mentioned to a Google Cloud Storage bucket as per the demo, or store your data in BigQuery. That's for unstructured data, and then for structured data, so you do support CSV files. And I think, yeah, so contact center, the call center solutions, I did mention the integration with the telephony partners.
Perfect. So keeping the conversation going still with integrations, we had a question come in. I work in a company that a third-party service, I believe, chat with users. If we decide to move to Dialogflow, do you have the option of a native chat that we can integrate into our website or mobile app?
Xavier, do you want to take that? Because I think you are the expert of Dialogflow Messenger. I think this question is Dialogflow.
Yeah, so Dialogflow CX, on Dialogflow CX you have like built-in integrations. One of them is the Dialogflow Messenger, which is basically a code snippet that you can integrate in your website, and then boom, you have a bubble, like the classic bubble that you can find in the top right, in the bottom right, and that's it. Is you can deploy that in less than 5 minutes. And then for custom integrations like the mobile app, there's one endpoint that you can call. It's called the detect intent. That is in the Dialogflow CX API. So basically what you just need to create is on your mobile app, let's say that is Android, you just need to call that endpoint, and the endpoint, what it will do is basically enter the information of the user from your mobile app to Dialogflow, and then it will manage the response that you will get from that request. Is basically the response of the agent, like it will transition once you call to that API, will transition in the conversation. It will trigger everything, and it will give you just the responses that you need to tell to the user. So basically it's just one API call, and then with the user request, and then you will get the things that you have to tell to the user, as easy as this, just one call.
Awesome. Sounds great. All right, so moving along, and we did have a question around the code lab, so I dropped them into the chat as well, but they're also in the YouTube description, so you can access them quickly from there. Okay, our next question we'll take is, here we go. Sorry about that. How can I send a prompt to the model once deployed for each conversation? And then as a follow-up with a little bit of additional context, I would like to provide some context about my user so the model can provide a personalized response for that specific user's situation or reservation in my use case. And I'll bring it back to the primary question there.
Okay, so reading the first. Okay, I'm still trying to read the first question, but I do have the answer for the second question. Kind of that prompting the model once deployed for each conversation. I'm not entirely sure about you actually what you mean with the first question, but as it regards to this second question, and I think this is also no, I don't think it's in GA yet, but there is a new feature which is called generative personalization, which at the moment is what literally allows you to do what you want to do. So to inject, to distill a little bit of personalization into the LLM prompt. How would you do that? So let's say that, for example, back to my eligibility thing. Let's say that somehow the person is authenticated and I know a little bit about that person. If he or she asks a question like, hey, when is my next appointment? Since probably the bot knows that that person has returned from a trip, well, then the response should actually take into account the fact that that person has gone on a trip. So that's what we call generative personalization, which at the moment leverages metadata. So it's a free text JSON, okay, that you can include as part of your Dialogflow messenger integration. So there is a method that you need to call. I think it's the set context. So where you can inject that JSON free JSON object, as well as the detect intent method. So there is a way to be able to get a personalized response, which is not a standard data storage and response or generated response, but there's actually a way. At the moment, I think that we only support data store agent. So generative personalization only supports data store agent, but I think we're looking into also give that possibility within a generator and generative fallback.
Great. So stay tuned for more information there. So thanks for sharing that update, Alessia. Okay, well, we're going to take just 2 more primary questions. So we'll cover expertise required as one theme here. What technical expertise is required to use Vertex AI Conversation and Dialogflow CX? And then diving into some of the Gen AI features as well. So love to hear your thoughts here.
So in terms of like Vertex AI Conversation and Dialogflow CX, we can see them as no-code tools. Like this is like the best, platforms that you can use if you don't have like any technical knowledge, because they are visual tools and they are doing everything for you under the hood. Like for instance, in terms of Vertex AI Conversations, everything that is under the hood is huge, same as Dialogflow CX in terms of like all the AI and in terms of all the technical things. And what you are seeing is just like a kind of a no-code platform where you can design and focus on the conversation and not on the technical stuff. So no technical expertise at all. And then for generative AI, it is important to understand at least what is a large language model, what is a prompt, and how interact with large language model. It is not complex, it is not too technical, but it is important to know.
Great. Okay, we'll take the last question here. So this is around privacy, safety, data governance. And I will preface, if you want to dive even deeper into this topic, we are hosting a session dedicated to security, privacy, and Gen AI tomorrow. So do check that out. I'll drop the link into the chat, but hand it over, team, if you have any thoughts around these questions.
Yeah, we could potentially schedule 2 or 3 sessions to talk about security and data residency in Dialogflow CX. I think I will just call out a few things here. Okay, so data reduction always happens behind the scene, and if you enable that. So you can actually do parameter reduction, which means that the input provided by the user, the end user input, after being extracted by the entity, before it's actually saved in cloud logging or story in our database or in interaction logging as part of the conversation history, it will be reducted. So that's for security from a data reduction perspective. Dialogflow CX supports CMAC, VPC service control for private access to your services if you want to go, if you don't want to go over using a cloud function. And then of course the fact that you can choose the region where you want your agents to be deployed. I'm wondering if I'm missing something. Oh yeah, the guardrails. Okay, I don't think we do have time for yet another little demo, but I think I'm just going to say, if you do remember before the Generative AI tab as part of the ML tab, I only did show you where you define the prompt for generative fallback. If you scroll down that page, you also would see what we call banned phrases. Banned phrases are phrases that should be not handled by LLMs. Something that it's deemed unsafe that the user said, or at least trigger an unsafe response from LLM to prevent hallucinations and all this kind of stuff. What we do, we fall back to a prescribed response. So we kind of disable the response from LLM, and instead we do give the user, the developer defined agent response. That's one thing as a guardrail. And then a second one from an enterprise search perspective, so there is what we call, there are two checks related to grounding. Grounding is, it relates to the accuracy or like the level, like how likely is a response to be closer to your data. You can set the level of grounding. You can go from very low, if I'm not mistaken, to very high. So you can set a sort of like a grounding score. Every time a response from LLM is returned, it actually also comes with a score, which is again the likelihood. If this score is below the threshold that you set, so it's below, then we actually do not show that back to the user. Then there's also another feature which also comes from grounding, and again, it's to prevent hallucinations. So yes, there are several guardrails, and of course the fact that you can always look at logging and see how the conversations are going if something is said that should not, that by the agent it should be not said, and then tweak accordingly.
Amazing. Like you said, we could easily have an entire session or two around this topic. So no, we won't be able to cover everything today, but if you do have any further questions, we encourage you to add them into the AI ML forum in the community. That link is in the chat, and you can also find it in the YouTube description. And our team, community members, experts, champion innovators, and GDEs like Xavier will be in there, happy to help and troubleshoot your responses with you. So thank you all for spending our time together today. I certainly learned many new things, and it was great to see the live demos of these solutions in action. Thank you all for joining us. Before we close out, any final thoughts or recommendations from you, Alessia or Xavier?
Well, from my side, I hope that you all have, if not If we've not answered your questions, of course, I don't expect that we've done that. Although Chris has done an amazing job, and I do want to say thank you, Chris, for doing that. Because like without you, potentially it would have been just me and Xavi talking, and we would have answered probably none of the questions. And again, thanks, Lauren, for orchestrating this so nicely. Back to what I was saying. At least I hope that we've given the right inputs, the right links, and the right places, the right coordinates to be able to find a solution for the problem that you have. Because ultimately, as we said, there are many different ways to implement the same thing, and we've got so many services that's actually an issue. Xavi.
Yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out us out in our social media, in our like blogs or whatever. And yeah, thank you very much, Alessia, Chris, Lauren, for putting all of these, all this together. It was amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. We hope you have a great rest of your day, evening, or wherever you are in the world. We hope to see you next time.